Hello everyone, and welcome to the final round of the Tradewise Gibraltar Chess Festival. After 10 rounds, 4 players went into tiebreaks. In the first round of the tiebreaks, Levon Aronian faced Richard Rapport and he defeated him 2-0. First game, Rapport lost with the white pieces, although he blundered in a position that was definitely at least equal, but maybe even better. And the second game, of course, he had to go for a win with the black pieces, and that game, of course, Aronian won as well. In the second game, Hikaru Nakamura faced off with Maxime Vachier-Lagrave here, and it took them 4 games to decide the winner. They didn't go into Armageddon, but in the end, Maxime Vachier managed to kick out Hikaru Nakamura from the tiebreaks. So this is the final game of the tiebreaks between Levon Aronian and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. First 2 games were drawn, third game was drawn, and this is game 4. Aronian has the white pieces, and Maxime needs a draw for it to go to the Armageddon. So let's see this game, as it's quite interesting. Levon was already very low on time, probably after the opening, so he played the entire game after the opening like with 10 seconds on the clock. It was like really intense. So d4 by Aronian, and we have knight to f6, knight to f3, g6, and knight to c3. d5, bishop to f4, and similar to the first game they played when Aronian had the white pieces, he went e3 and h4. Here, after bishop to g7, he decided to go for knight to b5, immediately making some threats on the c7. Knight to a6, defending the c7 pawn, and now e3. c6, knight goes back to c3, and it seems like this was a waste of time, this knight b5 back to c3, but now this knight is very awkwardly placed on a6. And here is a very good question: should this knight stay on a6, or maybe knight c7 should be played? Maybe you shouldn't allow white to capture this knight with the bishop, maybe defend it with queen to b6. MVL decided to go for kingside castle, and Aronian immediately captured it. We have b captures, and here we have h3, not allowing any bishop to g4 ideas. This would be a good square for the bishop, so now the bishop doesn't really have any good squares to be developed. Knight to d7, 11 castles, and bishop to b7 now. Knight to a4, preventing black from pushing c5, but actually this is something Levon said in an interview after the game. Actually, he thought that MVL would play c5 here, as after c5 you don't really gain anything by capturing a pawn here. For example, knight captures, d captures on c5, simply rook to c8, and there really is no way to defend this doubled c pawn. So after this c5, if MVL had played this, maybe c3, and after rook to c8, black is just fine here, regardless of the doubled a pawn. But okay, after knight a4, rook to c8 was played, and now b4. Making a very nice outpost for the knight on c5, probably preparing to exchange it for the knight on d7. a5 here, we have knight to c5 immediately, now with an attack on the bishop on b7 that's undefended. Knight captures, b captures on c5, and here bishop to a6. Playing it with a tempo on the rook on f1, so rook to e1, and now a4, preparing bishop to b5 to create a sort of a blockade. Queen to d2, we have bishop to b5 as planned, and now comes e4. D captures on e4, rook captures on e4, and bishop to c4 now. Bishop to h6, here Levon wants to exchange that. We have bishop captures, queen captures, and here's a very good question. How do you stop rook to h4 with the threat of course, queen captures on h7? There is only one move that stops this, and MVL found it relatively quickly. He played f6. A nice way to blunder the game would be to play f5. You play f5 and you think that, okay, if rook to h4, I'm gonna go rook f7 and all is well. That would be wrong, because on f5 you get knight to g5. Now there is again the threat of checkmate. Only way to stop it is to play rook to f7. And after rook to f7, you simply capture the rook. And you can't capture the rook on e4 because the queen is attacked. After queen captures on h7, this comes with check, and black is falling apart. So MVL played a very nice move. He played f6, stopping both the threat of rook to h4 because he has rook to f7, and also this stops knight to g5. So knight to d2, remaneuvering the knight and preparing to push c4 after the bishop moves from c4. bishop to d5, attacking the rook, rook e3, and now comes rook to b8. We have c4, bishop to f7, and now again, as now this bishop is blocking the rook's idea of rook to f7, Aronian goes rook to e4, defending the d4 pawn, and also again threatening rook to h4. So g5, stopping rook to h4, rook 8 to e1 now, doubling up on the e-file, eyeing that e7 pawn. And here Maxime probably should have gone for either rook to b7, defending the e7 pawn, or a bit more active move, that is rook to b2, going for the knight on d2 that is undefended. But he played e5, and he thought that this actually prevents white from capturing it. If d captures, then queen captures on d2. The problem is Aronian captured a pawn, d captures on e5, and here's the problem: you can't capture on d2 because of e captures on f6, and there is no way to prevent queen to g7 checkmate, not even to prolong it. This is just outright losing. So after d captures on e5, bishop to g6 was played, attacking the rook, but now simply rook 4 to e2, defending the knight, and all is well for white. Rook to b2 with a double attack on the knight here, knight to f3, now rook captures, and f captures on e5. And here rook captures on e5. You don't want to play knight captures on e5. If you play that, then you get queen to d1 check, you lose a rook. So after f captures on e5, rook captures on e5, queen d1 check, and king to h2 is definitely a possibility. Aronian decided to go rook to e1 as he was extremely low on time. I think already here he was below 10 seconds. The time format, if I haven't mentioned it, is 3 minutes plus 2 seconds increment. So he constantly has to play for those 2 extra seconds. Queen to c2, attacking the c4 pawn, the a2 pawn, also kind of harassing that knight. The knight would really enjoy capturing or something, but then you lose the f2 pawn. And here Aronian played a3, saving that a pawn, not allowing MVL to create any passed pawns. But this was actually a great move, as he really saw it in a fraction of a second. Another interesting move, but not a great move, would be rook to e7. It seems like this is threatening checkmate, and it seems like a very dangerous move. But after queen c1 check and king h2, you have queen to f4 check. Now you either have to move the king back, allowing again queen to c1 check, or you can block this with g3, and now of course not capturing the knight, but simply queen to f6, and you're defending checkmate, and white really can't hope to make any progress here in this position. So after queen c2, calmly Aronian played a3. It was as if he had no idea he had like a couple of seconds on his clock. Queen captures on c4, and now queen captures on g5, finally bringing the queen into the game. Rook to f5, we have rook to e8 check, and this was a very nice hit, as the bishop cannot capture, the bishop is pinned. So king to g7, and now queen to e7 with check. King to h6, and now comes queen to e3 with check. And it would be very dangerous to go back with the king. If king to g7, then comes knight to d4. Attacking the rook on f5, this will be with check, and after bishop captures rook, then comes knight captures rook, this is with check. Also the queen is attacking now the bishop on e8, so if you don't want to be down a piece, you have to play king to f6, but now comes knight to d6, attacking the queen, and this comes with a double attack on the bishop on e8, so black is really without a move here. You have to block it, but now comes knight captures on e8 check. King moves, now you capture the queen, and it's all over. You're down a pawn and the whole piece. This is completely winning for white. So after this queen to e3 check, of course not king to g7, and players saw this in like really a fraction of a second. It was really amazing. Queen to f4, blocking check and offering a trade of queens. And okay, you might get some improvement on this knight d4 move, attacking the rook. But like I said, so little time on the clock, there wasn't time for maneuvers like this. So Aronian simply captured. We have rook captures, and now rook to e6. Rook to c4, and rook captures on c6. And after all has calmed down, you see 5 pawns for Levon and 3 pawns for Maxime. And Maxime's a pawns are doubled, so it's pretty much a winning endgame. But it was really really all about the time. Will Levon be able to convert this with so little time on the clock? King to g7, knight to e5 now, attacking the rook and the bishop, rook to c1 check, king h2, and the bishop to e4, attacking the rook on c6. Rook to a6, giving up the c pawn, but the a7 pawn will be captured with check. So rook captures, first rook captures on a7 with check, king moves, and now knight to d7, attacking the rook, rook to f5, and now rook captures on a4, attacking the bishop, bishop to c6, attacking both knight and the rook, but rook to g4 check. King moves, and now knight to b8, attacking the bishop, and here Maxim tried bishop to b7, with the idea that this will kind of limit the movement of this knight, maybe preparing king to e7 and maybe some king d8 to c7 and picking up the knight, but f3 here, not allowing the rook to capture on f2, and here rook to b5 was played, and this was the move that basically finished the game. Here Aronian immediately found rook to b4. This forces Maxim to exchange rooks. If you move the rook, then of course rook captures bishop on b7 with check, so he had to exchange rooks here. Rook captures on b5, a captures on b5, and in this position Maxim Vachier-Lagrave resigned the game, and Levon Aronian is the 2018 Tradewise Gibraltar Chess Festival winner. Why did he resign? It seems that black can maybe play king to e7, and now it seems that the bishop and the king are preventing this knight from escaping. So maybe black could win this knight and maybe draw the game somehow. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. White can simply push f4 here, and after black goes for the knight, here comes b5, and now you have the c6 square available for the knight. And being even if you win the b5 pawn, there's still 2 pawns up. This is completely winning. So after this a captures on b4, Maxim resigned the game, and after a long day, Levon Aronian is the winner. And he said in an interview that you know, he felt very sad because in that round 10 against Hikaru Nakamura, he thought for a fraction of a second that rook captures on h5 was winning, but in the end he had to draw that game, and he had to play like 2 more games against Richard Rapport, and then 4 more games against Maxim Vachier to claim this title. So yeah, a very intense tournament, and I do hope you enjoyed the coverage. As of tomorrow, I'm returning to some old classics from the 19th century, and maybe some of your favorite chess players like Fischer, Tal, Alechin, and such. So yeah, I do hope you enjoyed it. I haven't found an interview with Levon after this game, but as they'll probably upload it, so I will add it in the description so you can enjoy it if you haven't found it already. And that's it. I would like to thank Timothy McCaskey for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with some good old chess classics.